Hello team and welcome back to Winners and Losers, where we break down the latest and greatest Premier League action. But you've heard enough from us on the results front, and we are now popping our recruitment hats on because we're going to discuss various managerial candidates for the vacant Southampton job and who we would opt for. Okay, so Southampton Dukes, just to paint a picture, are looking for their third manager of the season after sacking Nathan Jones on Sunday after just 95 days in charge. That was coming, wasn't it? Let's have it right. The former Luton boss, who becomes the Saints' shortest serving manager in the Premier League era, lost 9 of his 14 matches in charge, including 7 in 8 in the Premier League. You know who'll be delighted about this? De Boer. He's taken his miserable record, hasn't he? He's possibly the worst manager to grace the Premier League era. Before we get on to that, ask the question what went wrong in their most recent result, because that ultimately did lead to Nathan Jones getting the chop. So while I said we're kind of done with fixtures, I'm going to backtrack on that a little bit and just ask you what happened against Wolves, because at one point it was looking rosy.
It was looking rosy, but I feel like it felt inevitable at some stage in the next 2 weeks, because he'd alienated the fans. I don't know whether you'd seen the comments underneath every Southampton post in the last week or so. He'd taken on the players as well. He said he was making compromises due to personnel reasons. And it just felt like he'd alienated too many people and ruined all his backing. There was, Ricky Gervais, David Brent memes going around Twitter. Some of his quotes were, I thought, truly bizarre. And the results simply weren't good enough as well. I think he could have got away with it if the results were better. But except for some cup performances, really, not least beating Man City out of the Carabao Cup. No one saw that coming. It's been pretty miserable, particularly in the league. And on the weekend, it was another example of that. They were 1-0 up through a Carlos Alcaraz goal, who I think's actually looked like one of their better signings since arriving. But Mario Lemina was sent off after 27 minutes for Wolves for a second bookable offence. Another weird moment of VAR this year. Apparently this weekend, it was because Lemina was the third person to approach the referee. I didn't actually know that was a rule, but I'm quite glad it is being enforced. But I think they need to tell everyone about it before they start doing it. Anyway, Jan Bednarak then conceded a hapless own goal. He's had a miserable season after barely being used at Villa, then being brought back. Then João Gomez scored the winner. And Nathan Jones' get out of our club just rang around St Mary's. It was audible through the TV screen. But now rock bottom, they're 4 points behind 17th place Leeds. It's been pretty miserable, and he hasn't been particularly hard done by. I think they've only won one of their last 5 league games on XG. As I said, he's made some ridiculous public statements. It felt absolutely inevitable. But Chris, let's look to the future now, because they are looking for a manager at the same time as another Premier League club, which is never the best situation to be in.
No, that is Leeds, of course, and Leeds are, have a better squad. They're 4 points better off, so they're more attractive prospect, aren't they, for the top managerial candidates that are left, that are available out there. Jesse Marsch, of course, has been linked with them. In fact, I think he's favourite with various bookmakers. He was obviously fired a week ago by Leeds after 2 wins in their previous 17. But unlike Nathan Jones, it was a widely held opinion amongst the Leeds fan base that he was a nice guy, that he was well liked by the players, and his style of football, I guess, simpatico with what we've seen before at St Mary's, right? Not totally alien to that of Ralph Hasenhüttl's. I don't quite know what Nathan Jones' style was. Such was the amount he compromised, so couldn't possibly comment on a correlation there. Other names being linked: Ralph Hasenhüttl, Steven Gerrard, Dean Smith, Rafa Benitez. A pretty uninspiring list when you've got to save yourself, particularly given how it ended with Ralph Hasenhüttl at Southampton. How can he even be on that shortlist? I had to double check what I was reading just then. But from those names, who would you opt for, or would you go for a wild card that's not even been mentioned by the English media?
Yeah, I'd rip up that list. That is a horrendous list of managers. I'm not inspired by any of them, and they're so different as well. Ralph Hasenhüttl and Rafa Benitez probably couldn't be any more different stylistically. And after this completely wasted few weeks, or few months really, under Nathan Jones, they need to get on track, and they need to get on track fast. I think some of their January business looks reasonably promising, particularly Kamaldeen Sulemana. I think he established himself at Rennes as a player that can make a difference in a top 5 league, and he looked pretty bright against Wolves. And of course, I've already mentioned Alcaraz as well. I have been talking about on Twitter for the last week that some Premier League club should go for Marcelino. He's a completely polar opposite coach to Hasenhüttl and Marsch at Leeds and Southampton, but he's a really solid defensive coach, excelled at Athletic Club, Valencia and Villarreal, of course. The only issue is, I put it on Twitter and someone said, I don't think his English is great. So maybe with only, 18, 17 games left of the season, that would be a big, big risk. But Chris, I mean, of any of these names take your fancy, or am I just being, harsh?
Well, not to be boring, but when Everton were looking for a new manager, I also touted on Winners and Losers Marcelino for the Toffees. So I do think he's one of the better options available that's got a proven track record of putting together a really tight defence in a really short amount of time. I mean, his football isn't the most inspiring. We know that Southampton's owners, their brand is progressiveness, isn't it? So they might do something a little more adventurous or go for someone more unproven. But again, to go back to that Leeds comparison, they might be quite disheartened by the fact that Corberan and other young upcoming managers, the gentleman at Rayo Vallecano, seemingly turned down their overtures. So it is getting pretty desperate. We are in Sam Allardyce territory. I don't think I've got a better suggestion than Marcelino. And also, Domenico Tedesco, who is well versed in the Red Bull style of things, who does play that those quick, transitional style of play, took over Belgium, who love a mediocre to good manager themselves, don't they? So, yeah, it's top managers in very short supply at current. I'll be astounded if they avoid relegation at this point. But what do you lot at home think? Let us know who your preferred option for Southampton head honcho would be, and we'll elaborate on it maybe on an episode of Sunday Vibes or future episodes of Winners and Losers, maybe even The Talking Point. We've got so many shows coming out of our ears these days. So like this video, subscribe to the channel with notifications on if you haven't already. We'll catch you next week on Winners and Losers, midweek on Continental Club and Talking Point, and go and check out some of our YouTube shorts. We've been pumping them out recently. Goodbye.